Hello and welcome to another episode of the British Culture Podcast. As always, I'm joined, as always, with the one, the only, Sam. Sam, are you having a fantastic, incredible, unbelievably good day today?
No, it's 20 past 9 in the morning here in Chile, James. I'm tired.
Fair enough. And here in the UK, the weather sucks as usual. So what do you expect? Today, we're going to talk about quite an interesting topic, I think. We're going to talk about what do Brits think of Americans? What do British people feel and think about people from the United States? The first thing I will quickly say, guys, is that yes, we use the word Americans to talk about people from the United States. I am very aware that America is a big continent, North America and South America. And of course, you guys listening from Argentina and Colombia and Peru and other countries like that, obviously you are also Americans, okay? But in the English language, the word Americans for us generally refers to people from the United States. That's basically just how it is in the English language.
It refers to the Yankees.
That's right, it refers to the Yanks. The Yanks or the Yankees is a nickname that we sometimes use when referring to Americans, right? They're Yanks, basically. I thought in this podcast a good way to do it, Sam, is that we can start by talking about negative things about Americans. And then at the end, we can talk about some positive things about Americans to end on a good note, basically. So I think I'll start by asking Sam, let's start with some negative things about Americans. And do you have any things like negative feelings or things that you think about Americans? What do you think?
Oh, where do I get started, James? I don't want to be too rude today because I often come off as very cynical, a little bit bitter. But I am just a British man, unfortunately. That's how we come off, right? Very cynical, very bitter. But the truth is, when I meet Americans, normally they're really nice people. But when I think about Americans, the group, it fills me with like a bitter taste in my mouth. I don't particularly like them as a group of individuals. The thing that always jumps into my head is whenever you are on holiday or whenever you're traveling and you just hear the group of American tourists from across the hotel, or you're out you're out at a tour, like a guided tour or something, and you just have two Americans asking possibly the most stupid questions any person could ever dream up. Loud, obnoxious. I think those are the two best words to describe Americans, in my opinion. Like I said, I meet quite a few Americans, and individually they're all great. I really like them. All the guys at English Sponge I get along with really well, of course. Americans I meet in my personal life I get along with really well. I don't know, maybe it's hardwired in my DNA to not like them, you know? They're like our little brother who suddenly got taller and stronger than us, and maybe we're just not happy about it.
Well, Sam, you're not pulling any punches today, are you? You're not pulling any punches. Yeah, I understand what you mean for sure. I agree. Like every American that I've actually met, like one-to-one, face-to-face, I've generally gotten on with quite well. It's quite an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? I don't know why that would be. On a one-to-one basis, the Americans that I've personally met, I've really gotten on with quite well. However, the American tourist, does get on your nerves a little bit when you hear that strong, loud American accent, maybe in a quiet cafe, like all the British people are sat there sort of talking quietly, drinking their coffee, and you'll hear sort of like this conversation to the side of two Americans like, oh my God, I went to Oxfordshire. It was so awesome. Have you been there? And it just like cuts through the noise, you know? So I do know what you mean. They do kind of, a lot of American tourists do speak loudly. And I have to tell you, it does get on my nerves when they mispronounce the names of like places in the UK. Like when they say like, I was in the River Thames, or I was in Berkshire. There's something about that really cuts me deep. I really hate that.
I know how you feel when it comes to the mispronouncing of names. The thing I have noticed, and I especially noticed this when I travelled to America, and that was as soon as somebody finds out that you are British, they immediately ask you, firstly, are you from London? Which for me, it's very easy to say, yes, I am. But secondly, they then just pick out some random human being that they know and ask you if you know them. I was speaking to some Americans at a water park in Disneyland, Florida, a very long time ago. And I was waiting in the queue behind them and, got to talking. And they're like, oh my God, you're British. I love your accent so much. And all of the typical stuff. And then one of them went, oh, do you know George Mills from Peterborough? I went, who? I went, oh no, George Mills, he's a friend of mine. What do you mean, do you know a random person that you know in Peterborough? And that's not the first time this has happened. I've had multiple Americans just ask me if I know random people in cities far away from my own.
You mean, Sam, you mean to say you didn't know George Mills, really?
No, I know. Shocking as it is, I don't know all 60 million people in the UK. I know I'm pretty famous these days, but I haven't quite got to that level. Okay, James. So I want to talk to you about the natural enemy of the average American. And that is basic geography. Why do you think Americans struggle so much with basic geography?
Yeah, this is a good question. I suppose I should probably say that it's kind of obvious, but of course it's not all Americans. Like obviously there are a lot of Americans that do know where places are in the world. They know where things are. But I do think the stereotype of Americans not knowing geography so well, I think it does hold water, right? I think that stereotype does hold water. I think that it is true that quite a number of Americans don't really know where things are outside of America so much. I think the most sort of embarrassing ones are when America may be at war with a country. Let's say we're talking about the war in Ukraine or the war in Iraq or like Afghanistan. And I've seen in street interviews where Americans are talking about the war in Ukraine and we need to send more troops and more weapons to Ukraine. And then the interviewer says like, okay, can you point to Ukraine on a map? And they are kind of standing there stunned like, oh no, like I don't. Can you please point to Ukraine on the world map? And the fact is they don't know where Ukraine is. Like they look at the map and they actually don't know where that country is. And to me, it's kind of embarrassing because they were talking about this country with such confidence, like, all about the war and we need to send weapons there, but they actually don't know where it is. And I suppose this is probably, there's a good reason Americans can be like this. And it's because the USA is a little bit of a bubble, of course, right? It has this kind of bubble effect where, Americans, quite a lot of Americans don't travel too much outside of America. There are good reasons for this. I mean, the fact is the USA is a gigantic country. It's absolutely gigantic. And there are so many places to travel within the US. In that you don't actually, if you want to go on holiday or something, you don't really need to leave. In the US, you have all kinds of places. You've got all kinds of temperatures. If you want cold, then go to New York or Boston, right? But if you want nice sunny weather, just fly down to Miami fly down to Florida and you've got a completely different climate. If you want to see sort of the desert, then you go to the Southwest, you go to Arizona or wherever. And you have basically everything you really need is there in America. You compare that with us in the UK. If we want hot, sunny weather, we sort of need to leave the country, right? And so, yeah, Sam, what do you think? Why do you think that, you know, a fair number of Americans are not so good with geography?
Yeah, so this stereotype is being perpetuated by themselves. So it's not just something that we have perpetuated, it's something that's being perpetuated by themselves as well. They are the ones who are also pushing this stereotype to the rest of the world. If you guys want a little bit of native level English practice, Jimmy Kimmel has a fantastic, I think it's Jimmy Kimmel, he has a fantastic series of videos where he goes out into public with a big map in the USA and he asks Americans to pick basic facts. He says things like, name 2 countries. Or he says, can you please find China on the map? Or I'm pretty sure there was one where even it was, can you find the USA on the map? And there was an alarming number of people who could not. Why? Of course, it comes from quite a self-centered reason. America and Americans truly believe they are the center of the world and everything revolves around them. Now, I absolutely don't blame the Americans themselves for this. I think they're a victim of propaganda. And I think Americans are a far greater victim of propaganda than perhaps anybody realizes. The point you made about the passports and people not really ever traveling outside the country, that definitely still exists, but in recent years it has been changing. Over the last 10 years, unfortunately, Americans have discovered international travel. And now it's basically impossible to go anywhere without hearing that grating American accent come from across the room. Hey, can I pay with dollars? No, you're in the UK.
Okay, before we move on to the positives of Americans, there is something that I have to talk about. And this is something that has been driving me up the wall for like my whole life, I think. That is something that I would call US defaultism. Do you understand what I mean, US defaultism? What I mean is that, like, I'll give you some examples of US defaultism. It's like the idea that the United States is like the default country. It is like the basic country, the first country, like the main country. The first thing that comes to mind is time zones, okay? The names that they give their time zones in the US. For example, one of the time zones in the United States is called Eastern Time, right? Well, when they say Eastern Time, myself as not as an American, when I see that time zone, I'm thinking, if you're calling it Eastern Time, are you talking about China? Because like that's the East, right? Like China, Japan, Korea, or whatever. No, Eastern Time refers to the east of the US, right? The east coast of the US. And then they have like Central Time. Okay, Central Time, what would that? Would that be like in Europe somewhere, like the center? Like, you know, we do the time zones from the West, you know, America would be the West and China would be the East and Europe would be somewhere in the middle. That's how the time zones are made, yes. But no, Central Time means, of course, the center of the United States. And this is just one example. Another example that kind of drives me up the wall a little bit is like I'm watching like fitness videos online, like videos about the gym and so on. And it's just assumed that we all know like what pounds are and like what cups are, like the measurements. Like they'll say, okay, if you're making these, let's say, protein cookies or whatever, just go ahead and add 1 cup of, 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of butter. And I'm like, wait, what the hell is a cup? What is that? A cup? Like, that is so confusing to me. Like, what do you mean a cup? And when I was a teenager, I thought that a cup was just, you could just take like any cup that you wanted and just put like a cup of flour. But of course, a cup is a measurement that they basically, as far as I know, I could be wrong about this, but I think they only use it in the US. I don't know if other countries use the measurement of a cup, right? There are probably some other examples of US defaultism that I can't think of right now. Sam, can you think of any more like this? Or no?
I don't know if I can think of any more directly, but this is especially present on the internet, and especially on websites like Reddit and Twitter, where people just assume that you're American a lot of the time on there, and then when you're not, they're like, well, why are you using an American website then? There is a Reddit account. If you enjoy looking at stupid Americans as much as I do, there's a fantastic Reddit subreddit called Shit Americans Say. James, I'm sure you can put up the little r/ at the bottom of the screen here. If you need 20-30 minutes of entertainment, go onto this subreddit and just enjoy the absolute idiots that are some of these average Americans, just assuming that everybody is American, assuming they are center of the world, assuming that because they are American, they are therefore the best at everything. When you talk about American defaultism, it's not just about assuming America is the center of the world. It's also about assuming that everything America does is correct and the right way of doing things, whereas everything everybody else does is the wrong way of doing things. And if you have a different way of living or a different way of understanding or thinking, it's clearly wrong. It shocks me sometimes to see how quickly Americans will jump to defend really, really bad practices. For example, working conditions. I've seen online so many Americans jumping to defend the fact they don't get paid vacations and paid sick leave. And they said, oh, well, Europeans, you're just lazy, you don't want to work, that's why you get paid vacations. Huh? Like, there's so many little examples like this where they'll jump to defend and jump to argue against things against their own interests that would actually materially improve their lives and their working conditions, just because it's their experience, not yours. So yeah.
Yeah, I've heard. I know exactly what you mean, and definitely on the internet, I do think this is where it is most prevalent. Yes, online. For example, you may be talking about, I don't know, you may be discussing like a political issue or something, crime, or I don't know, whatever. And then they will say something like, well, you know, that it's it's because of the Democrats. And I'm like, wait, why are you talking about the Democrats? Like, why do you think I'm an American immediately? Or they'll say, well, that's because Trump is ruining our country. It's like, I don't live in the US. Mm-hmm. Why do you think I'm in the US, you know?
Sorry to interrupt, James. My favourite one at the moment is right-wing Americans are constantly saying on Twitter, London has fallen. London has fallen. London has fallen. When actually, statistically, London is the safest it's been in 20, 30 years. We have lower rates of crime, lower murder rates. And they talk about London as some sort of lawless hellhole, when actually it is far, far safer than the average normal American city. But anything to fit agendas and narratives, I guess.
I wonder, are we actually going to have any time to discuss positive things about Americans?
Well, I think the real question, James, is, are there any positives to Americans? Can you actually think of a single good thing about these people? Because I can't.
I can, actually. I honestly can. This was supposed to be a 50-50 podcast of positive and negative things. But we have just been sat here just railing on Americans for like 20 minutes. And we have like no time left to discuss anything positive. But I can. So yes, Sam, I do have some positive things to say about Americans. First of all, I think that Americans, when we talk about geography and being a little bit ignorant to other cultures. I honestly do think this is changing. I believe this was really true like 20 years ago, that Americans, I think 20 years ago, a lot of Americans really were quite ignorant about the rest of the world. However, I do think this has changed. Like I said, all of the Americans I meet are not ignorant. They're not like, they do know about the rest of the world. Now, I could be getting a bit of a biased sample of Americans, because the kinds of Americans I bump into are obviously the ones that have traveled, that they are outside their country already, yes. But they do seem to be quite aware. The other thing is, America is a giant place. I mean, there are 300 and something million people, Americans, right? A lot of these people are incredibly smart. I mean, the US has I believe, the best universities in the world. I believe that Harvard is ranked higher than Oxford. I could be wrong. I actually don't know, but I think that Harvard and Yale, I mean, these are some top class universities, right? These are some of the best in the world. You know, there are a lot of incredibly smart Americans, you know. There has to be. You could not have a country that is this developed and this, you know, and this rich if everybody was just a bloody idiot. You know, that can't work. You can't become the number one most powerful country in the world if your country is just filled with morons, can you? So there must be a fair number of smart people there. And so the other thing is, yes, I think that like 20 years ago, Americans thought that their country was the best, right? They would be like, we're number one, like
America number one. Mm-hmm.
America number one. And this was true, like it really was true that Americans just thought their country was the best. But today, you know, in 2026, I don't know if this is really true anymore. Like I think, in fact, I think a lot of Americans nowadays actually feel quite negatively about America. I honestly think that it has actually changed quite a lot. I think a lot of Americans believe, in many cases, are even now too negative about their own country. Like, I honestly think that the pendulum has actually swung quite far in the other direction, right? In the past, they used to be overly positive about America. But I actually think the pendulum, in a lot of cases, has swung the other way. And they are now just constantly criticizing America about everything, right? Especially, you know, since Trump was elected around that time. And I do think this is true. And so I don't know, like, I think Americans are changing. They are evolving a little bit. From my perspective, I think that they have become a lot more aware of like what the things happening around the world and different cultures. Sam, am I talking nonsense here? Or is there some truth to what I'm saying?
I think there's a bit of truth to it. No, there's
Okay.
definitely a bit of truth to it.
Just a little bit, but not much.
A bit. Mm-hmm.
Sam, do you have anything positive to say about Americans or not?
Do I have anything positive to say about the gun-toting, beer-drinking, wife-beating, squirrel hunting, mullet-wearing, crazy, self-centered group of people that are known as Americans? Well, they make some great barbecue food.
And on that note, I think we'll end the podcast. Thank you for joining us today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed listening to our well-balanced discussion of Americans today. Thank you for coming.
Also, Brian, AJ, Alia, Courtney, John, and any of the others that I missed. I really love you guys.
Yeah. We love the Americans here at English Sponge. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.